So our first delegation after October 7th was a delegation of journalists from the region. And this delegation was really to show them how their media, their Instagram will only show them maybe Al Jazeera. It will only show them the Middle East eye. But come to this country to see what you don't get to see in your news. And our point is never to spoon feed anyone information. It's land in the country, see things for your own eyes, see what really happened on this side of the border.
Welcome to What Came After. I'm your host, Manya Marcus. On What Came After, we'll take a look at the many ways people's lives have changed since the brutal massacre in Israel on October 7th, 2023. We'll be speaking to people around the world to learn how this profound moment in Jewish and global history continues to shift, shape, and change them. To learn more, please visit us at whatcameafter.com. Hi everyone, this is Manya Marcus. On March 11th, I sat down with Alyssa Anise, a native of Manchester, England, who now lives in Israel. Several years ago, while working closely with Holocaust survivors, Alyssa promised them their stories would not be forgotten. This promise has become the defining mission of her life. Today, she works with Sharaka, bringing Holocaust education to Muslim leaders in the Arab nations that are signatories to the Abraham Accords, places where that history is either deeply misunderstood or deliberately obscured. I'm posting this conversation 1 week after my episode with Danesh Malmir. Danesh, an Iranian man, spoke about his awakening upon discovering Holocaust history, forbidden and denied in his country. Alyssa speaks about the urgency of bringing that same truth to others. Together, Danesh and Alyssa make a convincing case for the power of Holocaust education in the Middle East. I hope you enjoy this episode. Okay, it is March 11th, 2026, and I am honored to be here in Iryam, near Netanya. Are we in Netanya?
We're near Netanya, yeah, in Yamim.
I keep telling people that when I do interviews during this war, I barely know what planet I'm on, so thank you for letting me know. I am here with Alyssa. I don't know your last name. You know what? I just want to tell listeners, everything that I've been doing since the war is so slapdash and feels so kismet. You said it was a shidduch that was being made, and I really feel the same way. So I don't know much about you. Please introduce yourself. Tell us what you do, where we are. I would love to learn more.
Hi, thank you so much for making the time, and I'm happy you got stuck in Israel. Thank God really meaningful things are coming out of it. My name is Danesh and Alyssa. I'm originally from Manchester, United Kingdom. I've lived here now for almost 9 years, and I am the Holocaust Education Program Manager at an organization called Sharaka that works in people-to-people diplomacy in the Abraham Accords countries and across the region as well. And I've been in this position for almost 2 years. And I started after October 7th, and this position has really changed my outcomes on the region, on what the true definition of V'ahavta l'orecha kamocha means, love your neighbor as yourself. I think growing up, I didn't really understand the full extent of what that phrase meant. And I really try and live up to it now every single day of my life.
Okay, so first of all, you're 25 years old. You've been in this role for 2 years, since October 7th, and you're saying that you work on Holocaust education in Arab countries that participate in the Abraham Accords. That is a huge job. That's a huge job. Sometimes I say on the mic, I wish I had video so people could have seen my head just bounce back and go, this is unbelievable. Tell me what drew you to this work and how you found yourself in this position.
So I think since I was a child, I grew up in Manchester, as I said, and there was a lot of anti-Semitism in general that I would see on the news, that I would see on the media, and also within our communities as well. And because my family traveled to Israel a lot growing up, I always used to see how the Jewish communities abroad lived under such scrutiny. And yet you leave and you arrive in Israel and you go to shul and there's maybe one nonchalant security guard standing outside. And it was always something I noticed from maybe 14. I remember literally turning around to my mom and saying, I understand that there's such bad anti-Semitism in the world, but why? And I'd already in my mind understood this weird universe that I was living in, where in this Jewish state, Israel, which, we're currently in an Iranian regime attack with ballistic missiles over my head, but I still feel safer being proud of my Jewish identity and walking around here than I do in England. And I think I noticed that from a very young age. And I always used to say, I want to work in combating anti-Semitism in some form. And then I made Aliyah and I did 2 years national service at Yad Vashem. And I think for my first week, my job there was working with Holocaust survivors, going with them to share their stories with different groups from around the world. And I remember my first week there, I turned around and I said, I have such an insane responsibility right now because my job is literally listening to the stories of survivors and making sure that groups from around the world never forget them. So I need to make sure that I am also active in making sure we don't forget what happened during the Holocaust. And then I studied government and diplomacy, and my whole time I was very active in Holocaust remembrance in many different ways. But the more I started researching it, the more I understood the root issue of Holocaust denial and distortion, and even anti-Semitism comes a lot in today's society from the Middle East, from Arab communities, from Muslim communities, not by their own fault, but by their education systems that they grew up in. The last generation, this generation, since the Abraham Accords, it's already been improved very, very much. But I decided to devote myself to combating anti-Semitism, Holocaust distortion, and Holocaust denial within the Arab world. And I wake up and one day and I got a phone call from somebody who offered me to join a delegation of 40 Muslims from around the Muslim and Arab world to Poland. And this was March 2024, so a few months after October 7th. And this was my dream. And I said, yes, but who are you? And how do you have my number?
Kind of how I felt when we connected. Yes.
Exactly. And then a few days later, I arrived in Poland and I look around me and I said, wow, this is everything I wished I knew I existed. And it existed within this organization called Shiraka, which I'm now glad to be a part of. And we have a team in Israel and a team in the Arab world. And I look at my friends, my colleagues in the Arab world, and I say, you are my true role model in humanity because you are allowing us to really understand what interfaith dialogue means, what bringing people together means. And the meaning of Shiraka means partnership. And I think I'm in Arabic. And I'm understanding the true meaning of partnership on a daily basis, thanks to this work as well. And living out a commitment I made to the Holocaust survivors I met at Yad Vashem, which is I promised them that I would not let their stories not be remembered when they are no longer with us. And I'm living out that promise every day as well.
So first of all, this is an amazing story. I'm happy to be hearing it. I want to emphasize actually that the reason that we met, I didn't understand how we met until 5 minutes ago, was that I had reached out to Rabbi Joe Wolfson in Tel Aviv, but he's originally from London, but you are in his community. And he did an episode with me a while ago. And he talked about when he was a rabbi in New York, how it was so confusing to him that his students at NYU really thought of their Jewish identity as exclusively a faith-based kind of maybe ethnic orientation, and they had no even imagination for anti-Semitism. And how, on the one hand, it would have been so beautiful had it been true, right? And now in this post-October 7th world, that's been really something that's been revealed and ruptured. And when I speak to people from Europe, you are only 25. You've had this understanding and this muscle to want to address this since you were a young teenager. It's really different than the American experience. So thank you for sharing that. One thing that has been disorienting for me, not just being in this war, but on October 6th, 2023, if you had said to me, I know a survivor, I would have understood very clearly you're speaking about a Holocaust survivor. Now, when somebody says to me, I know a survivor, I actually assume that they're referring to somebody who survived October 7th. I'm wondering what it is like for you to straddle this world between one generation of survivors moving into another generation of survivors, and just how you think about that transition.
I think actually it's something that I often emphasize with my groups. I like to also explain to them the significance of the Holocaust, and even how when we think about October 7th and the last 2.5 years, the fact that we are so grateful to have a country, to have an army. And what happened on October 7th is tragic. Let's not forget for any moment. But we are proud to have a country, and we are proud to have people that stand side by side with this Jewish state and other countries that can stand up with us. And I think when it comes to the Holocaust, I really like to signify that it's so unfortunate that we didn't have this back then, that 80 years ago, we didn't have a country, we didn't have a state. The people in the Western world that for some reason knew what was going on, and they decided at that moment not necessarily to do anything about it straight away. It took some time for them to join forces and really end the war. And so one thing I really like to remember is, first of all, how anti-Semitism existed then and existed today. And we do see parallels of anti-Semitism, but I do not like to make comparisons. And I think it's something what we do see a lot of also in today's society, comparisons of October 7th to the Holocaust. Both are tragic, do not get me wrong. I'm not saying that any is less tragic, but I am trying to say that we have the right to stand up in today's society and defend ourselves. And we have this land that we wanted to go back to for so long. And we're understanding the struggle of having the state of Israel in today's society, but we have a state. And if only back then we had a place that we could have gone to as well.
So first of all, I'm not a Holocaust historian, but I think it's true to say that many countries jumped in not because they were particularly concerned about Jews, but I don't know that their response really had to do with sympathy for Jews so much as concern about the global order. And I interviewed a woman, non-Jewish woman in Poland, who said that she also doesn't like parallels because people in the Holocaust died alone and died quietly and nobody was paying attention. Essentially, she was really echoing what you're telling me right now. So tell me what it's been like to work with people in Arab countries who participate in the Abraham Accords. Are they surprised by what they hear about the Holocaust? What have they, if anything, heard about that chapter in history?
Shiraka was created right after the Abraham Accords between Morocco, UAE, Bahrain, the normalization agreement that happened in 2020, in order to go one step forward than the signature on the piece of paper between governments. We wanted to be that organization that connects between regular civil society. And we wanted to be the organization that breaks down stereotypes that existed for so long on both sides, also on the Israeli side and also within the Arab countries that signed on to the Abraham Accords, specifically the UAE and Bahrain. Morocco is a very different case because they have such strong Jewish heritage. There are over 1 million Jewish people that live in Israel of Moroccan descent. And that's something that the average Moroccan, they understand the Jewish heritage also that existed in Morocco. Obviously, when it comes to Israel, their opinions are a little bit different. When they signed on to the Abraham Accords, for them, it was to reignite that Jewish heritage that existed in that country before the state of Israel was founded and until that time. But I think when it comes to that education, until a few years before the Abraham Accords, you understood that a lot of what their media showed them, a lot of what their educational systems taught them, did have anti-Semitic rhetoric. It did have anti-Zionist rhetoric. And that is why the average person all of a sudden was confused. And then October 7th happened. And on the one hand, a lot of the people in these countries are what we call in Shiraka moderate voices in the region, moderate voices in the Middle East. They believe in globalization. They believe in working together. They believe in understanding how cooperation between others can also help themselves and their countries. But on the other hand, October 7th happened and it created this big problem within what's happening here in this land, not just how economic ties and other ties with Israel can help them. So our first delegation after October 7th was a delegation of journalists from the region. And when we say the region, we work mainly within the Abraham Accords, but also within Muslim and Arab figures from around the greater region or originally from the region. So they could be expatriates living in Europe, in the United States. They could be religious figures originally from those countries now living elsewhere. And this delegation was really to show them how their media, their Instagram will only show them maybe Al Jazeera. It will only show them the Middle East eye. But come to this country to see what you don't get to see on your news. And our point is never to spoon feed anyone information. It's land in the country, see things for your own eyes, see what really happened on this side of the border because they don't see that. And yes, there's the one extreme side and then there's what happens here, but they don't get to see anything of what happened on October 7th. They obviously heard to some extent that hostages were taken, but they didn't know what that meant. And we take them to near Oz, we take them to meet with hostage families. And I think that first delegation, and I wasn't yet in Shiraka, but I'm very close with some of the people that were on that delegation. They said as a journalist, it's their duty to show not just what they see on Al Jazeera, but to also show the other side. And they wrote about it and they shared. And that helps us get the voice out there to the region on things that are not shown there on the media. And we continue doing this work every 2 to 3 months. We bring a delegation from somewhere in the Muslim and Arab world to Israel, as well as delegations to Poland and Germany focused more on Holocaust education and anti-Semitism. And we work very closely with our sponsors, which are the Claims Conferences, in order to do this work. And we are the only organization, or the strongest, I don't want to say only in case maybe there's another smaller one, that works in connecting people from the Muslim and Arab world and the Abraham Accords countries to Israel to combat anti-Semitism and to work on combating Holocaust distortion and denial within their region, because we really believe that this is the way to combat extremism. And we believe that there are so many moderate voices in the region that feel safer speaking out when they see other people being involved in activities, and they just need the confidence that they're not going to speak out and be Israel's number one ally within a day, but that they can come and they can see things that they don't get shown in their countries, that they can learn aspects of history that they were not taught about, and that they can feel also safe asking questions, and asking questions which they don't ask out of hatred, but really out of ignorance, out of the fact that They are not educated on this in their societies. They don't see it. But here that's a comfortable area with other like-minded people like them that essentially believe that collaborating with people and working together with people from the region, and the Abraham Accords is something so beautiful because it's connecting the children of Abraham. And from a religious perspective, when you look at this, this is what also God wanted us all to do. He wanted us to be 3 different nations that came out of the same person to connect with each other and to learn from each other. And when you look at it like that, you take politics, you take so many conflicts off the table. That is what at Sharaka we're also trying to establish, this simple dialogue and partnership that can exist.
So let's say that I get you in the room with the educational minister, or I don't know how these governments work, but I get you in a position to do curriculum design in Bahrain, in the UAE, and in many of these, Morocco, right, these countries. If it were up to you, at what point would students in these places start learning about the Holocaust? And what would you make sure that they knew?
So I will say that all of these countries that you mentioned, all the countries of the Abraham Accords, have changed their curriculum slightly. Even Saudi Arabia, for instance, has also already included some aspects of Holocaust education in their curriculum before the Abraham Accords. Because as I said earlier, they're grown up in more of a radical society. You can't just go overnight from having anti-Semitic rhetoric in your education system to signing a normalization agreement with the state of Israel. There has to be some kind of changes in the education system and in general in society, and they made these changes. It is still missing to the large extent, and I would say the same in many areas of Jewish Holocaust education, that we look at it often from numbers perspective. But most people don't know that there were, I want to say 51, but the number may be mistaken, Muslim righteous among the nations during the Holocaust. There was an imam in Paris who saved Jewish people in Paris from the Nazis and their regime.
I just want to emphasize this because a lot of our listeners are American, and you say imam differently than we do, and this is such an important fact. So I'm just going to say it one more time. There was an imam in Paris who saved
Jewish people during the Holocaust from the Grand Mosque of Paris. And these are, in my opinion, stories that we can use to bring people together, to learn about history, to learn about what happened during the Holocaust. But to say if 82 years ago we stood side by side and a Muslim helped a Jew during their hardest time, why can we not do the same today? Why can we not learn through these stories to collaborate with each other, to work side by side with each other? Because their faith and our faith really believe that saving a life is very important. And I think this is something that we need to teach about. We need to teach about these stories because most people don't know. But I also think we need to teach about essentially the rise of the Nazi regime, because this is a true example of extremism that most people don't think about. When we think about extremism within the Muslim and Arab world today, we can understand more about it from how the Nazi regime started and how unfortunately the Holocaust ended. Because it started with several people having extreme views and writing about them and sharing them. But it ended in the murder of around 11 million people, 6 million Jewish people. And most people do not understand that it started just with a theory, just with anti-Semitic tropes in society and Mein Kampf, which in itself, when you read it in today's society, when you read experts of it, you don't necessarily understand everything Hitler was going to do several years later.
Right.
But we need to look back and understand how these things were built, how this extremism was allowed to happen. And we need to learn from it to combat extremism today. But we also need to learn about the stories of survival and the stories of Muslims who helped Jewish people during the Holocaust. We need to learn about the stories of the righteous among the nations who, in the hardest times of humanity, risked their lives to save Jewish people. And then we also need to look back and say, how did society allow this to happen?
This is very interesting because if I was in charge, and maybe it's good that I'm not, I think I might start with developing some kind of empathy around how brutally people were murdered, how these stories are just unimaginably painful and vast. But it sounds like you don't start with the gore and the horror. You start with understanding the systems that allowed for this to take place. I mean, I'm assuming that when you're at Auschwitz on the Poland trips, it's very clear to people how disgusting and horrifying this was. But at what point does that come into the process, really understanding the stories, not just of survivors, but victims?
It comes in because we go to Poland and we go to Yad Vashem and we hear these stories and they're all around. Why do we not focus on these stories? Because we don't ever want to be seen as the Jewish nation as victims. in today's society. And even right now, we don't want to be living under this, because that's not the point of learning about the Holocaust. It's not, we're still trying to live under this terminology of being a victim, because I don't think we are victims. And I think we need to learn how it happened, how it changed the Jewish identity around the world, because it changed Jewish people everywhere. We have a large portion of Ashkenazi Jewish people who are still trying to just make the numbers of the Jewish race around the world the same as before they were during the Holocaust, to keep traditions alive. And that's a big part of our identity in today's society. But it's more than that. It's also understanding how the tropes and the Holocaust are now that they grew up with, when they grew up with people around them telling them that maybe the Holocaust didn't happen, that Adolf Hitler was maybe a god person. With Mein Kampf, for instance, in many countries in the Middle East, including in Gaza, unfortunately, and in Egypt, Mein Kampf is a book which until today exists in their society.
Meaning like in their educational systems?
Not in their educational systems, but it's sold
in their bookstores.
In their bookstores. It's in many houses of upper middle class people. And understanding what's written in that book and understanding how that is not true, essentially, is what we're trying to do. We understand what they have been taught about the Holocaust, which is very little, or that the Holocaust didn't happen, or that figures like Adolf Hitler were good. And we want to re-educate them based on what we know that they were taught and what really happened. So we want them to understand that all these tropes and all these different rhetorics that are educated and mentioned in their systems are not the reality of what happened 80 years ago, but also how we can learn from this story to work together in today's society. And I'll share that it wasn't our initial message, Holocaust education, but why did we realize as an organization that it's so important? And it's more than Holocaust education. It's combating anti-Semitism in order to combat extremism in the Muslim and Arab world. And I'll even go further and say, in order to emphasize the moderate voices that exist in the region and how we can continue working together to promote interfaith dialogue and the Abraham Accords in their societies. And we got there because at the very beginning, we wanted to bring people together. And it's very hard to bring people together when they're brought up with these terminologies as part of their society. And it's not their fault. And somebody needs to take responsibility and to say, let's bring us together, let's celebrate each other, let's learn how to work side by side, but let's also take a moment and educate you on things that are so important for understanding about the state of Israel and Jewish people, which you did not grow up knowing about.
So I'm going to take you on a small detour to the absolute lowest forms of culture in America and talk to you about the Super Bowl for a moment. I don't know if you saw the ad. Did you see? There was an ad. Okay. I did not see this ad. I saw all the criticism of an ad. It was an ad that was discouraging anti-Semitism. And from what I understand, it featured a teenager, a teen boy facing a lot of bullying about being Jewish. And he was sort of dejected and deflated. And people felt, again, I haven't seen it, that it pushed a victim mentality and it didn't tell about the strength and resilience of the Jewish people. But I do think that what it represents in its effort is, again, this very fine line that we are always walking between explaining our strength and also acknowledging our losses and really the brutality of the history. Do you ever find when you're on these delegations that some people are more responsive to being in Israel and seeing how vibrant and alive it is, and some people are more responsive to being at Yad Vashem or in Poland and seeing what kind of real losses we've sustained as a people?
100%. And I think also what always gets me is the moments that somebody on our delegations, whether it's to Israel or Poland or Germany, the moments that change them, the moments that make them realize that something that they were brought up knowing isn't true. And I'll share one story that I think I'll, please God, share with my children and my grandchildren one day, because it's, for me, I never look at Israel as being so unique because it's not an apartheid state, because I grew up knowing this fact. And yet we had a delegation of Muslim leaders from Europe and the United States in Israel this past summer, late summer in October. And we took them to the National Library in Jerusalem. If you haven't been, I really highly recommend for people to go.
I've done most of my interviews there, actually. They have soundproof study rooms. Shout out to the National Library. Yes, it's a gorgeous place.
So they have this beautiful museum. And when we're entering the museum, and if you've been, just at the entrance, there was on one side a group of school children who are Arab and Muslim, and on the other side, a group of Jewish religious school children. Okay. And I'm there with this German religious Muslim leader who runs communities in Germany. She's originally from Turkey, and she came on our delegation. She was skeptical, but she's very open-minded, and she wanted to come and learn everything that she hasn't seen before. And at the beginning, she looks at them, and I see a tear start happening, and tears start forming in her eyes. And I ask her if she's okay. And she says yes, and she's very quiet, and she continues. And then we do a tour through the National Library. And as part of the tour, they take us to an Islamic book collection. And at this point, she starts bawling. She starts really crying her eyes out in front of me. And she turns around to me and she says, thank you. Thank you for bringing me here. And I asked her a little bit later what it was that was so hard for her. And she said, listen, I walked in and I see Jewish, religious, and Muslim school children side by side, something that I didn't think was possible in this country. And then you take me downstairs and you show me that both of these groups of school children get tours of Islamic books in the Jewish country. And she said, I don't think this is possible. Or I didn't think this was possible before I came here. She said, nobody in my community would know this is possible. And this is something that I realized that we take for granted in Israel a little bit as well, because I wish I could see this country through their eyes, through the eyes of somebody who grew up with all this hatred, or didn't necessarily grow up with it, but sees it in their platforms, in their social media feeds and in their media. And then another story I'll share, which is somebody who was in Yad Vashem with me. He's from Morocco originally, and he's a doctor, and we're walking there. And we get to the part where we understand that a lot of the people that were involved in the SS were doctors and had professional fields. And he stops and he asked the guide a question. He said, excuse me, did you just mention that? And I forget who it was, but it wasn't Mengele. It was somebody else that was senior position there, was a doctor. And the guide says, yes. And he says, I don't understand. He said, our biggest responsibility as a doctor is to look after every human life. How have I never been taught about this to this extent? How did I not know this? And how was this allowed to happen? And sometimes I look back at these stories, and this is what drives me, because it's people that understand the significance of Jewish heritage, Jewish history, the state of Israel, through these really small moments that you or I or most Jewish people around the world won't blink twice because we know about it. It's part of our reality. And I think it's really unique what I get to see on a daily basis. And I'm so grateful to be able to share what Chiraka does, because I think that it gives Jewish people from around the world hope. And I think after October 7th, we all lost hope. We lost hope on how to work with our non-Jewish neighbors, how to bring together people. And yet we're still able to thrive in doing our work. We're still able to bring people with communities to share this message to after. This doctor after has been recruiting people, not formally for us, but he's been sending me lists of people that he knows in hospitals and in the medical field in Morocco on a regular basis. He's in touch with me all the time. And he says that it changed his whole mindset. And this was after October 7th, in a world that you wouldn't think this is possible.
You have an incredible amount of enthusiasm and exuberance. It's really refreshing. We're in the middle of a war. You have a smile plastered across your face. It's really refreshing. But I do want to ask you, we are in the middle of unprecedented regional tension. It just feels biblical. What do you perceive to still be the greatest barriers for people to rehumanize Jews and Israelis? I mean, we're not perfect. We haven't made all the perfect decisions. This is just a place. It's an incredible place. It's an important place. We do remarkable things here. The story you just described of the Jewish children and the Muslim children seeing the same things, including Islamic texts. But I think a lot of the world has forgotten that we're people. What do you see in your work as the things that hold people back, as the greatest barriers for them to embrace a nuanced narrative that will encourage them to continue to engage?
Extremism, unfortunately. And I would say beyond that, it's the radical voices in today's society, which creates a lot of fear.
And I assume you mean across every spectrum.
Exactly, across every spectrum. I think, for instance, in the countries that we work with, it's important to note that everybody that joins our programs is risking something because of those. Again, it's a minority in most of these countries, but it's a small, very vocal minority of extremist voices within their societies that can harm their business, personal, whatever it is, opportunities. They are physically, thank God, for the most part, safe. I don't think anyone's going to come up to them because these countries are also relatively safe and believe in the Abraham Accords. But yes, they can get attacked on social media. They can get attacked in many other ways just for joining our programs. And it's just sad that this is the reality. And what's stopping us from being able to reach everyone that is a moderate voice is the fear that exists because of these extremist voices. And honestly, I really hoped, and I still today hope, that if the Iranian regime falls soon, we could be able to see a much stronger coalition of countries, whether it's join the Abraham Accords or sign on to agreements with Israel in other ways, and that this is the pathway to change. I think it will be a monopoly effect of countries in the region. It will be some countries joining and then others feeling comfortable to join. That doesn't mean to say it will be the exact same agreement as the Abraham Accords, but stronger agreements than the cold peace agreements we have with Lebanon, Egypt, Syria, whether they're military, economic agreements, whatever that is, something that creates more of a people-to-people connection. Because I do think that the minute you have the ability to host people-to-people activities without fear, it changes everything. And whether that's in Israel, in Poland, in Germany, or in their own countries, I think it's bringing people together to host discussions. That's when you realize that you have a lot more in common than you think. And that together you can actually work on amazing projects. When Israel and Morocco, when the Abraham Accords happened and they signed on to this agreement, the one thing that Morocco got out of it, which was better than anything else that they could have needed, was the agricultural sector.
Yes.
We helped them with the water irrigation.
This is huge, by the way. Like the need for agri-tech uniting Israel with the rest of the region is a huge opportunity. Please continue.
Exactly. And I think that that is something that people know deep down. They know how much this can help them. But because of these extremist voices, they are scared to announce the fact that they maybe want to work with Israel in agri-tech. And I hope, and I really do think that it can have the potential over the next few weeks, and depending on what happens with the regime in Iran, but it can have the potential to grow the amount of people that feel comfortable to do more work with Israel, wanting to collaborate on high-tech deals, on economic deals, on agro-tech. And we'll see what happens. But I think that that is part of what unfortunately makes our work a lot harder. It's these extremist voices which are very, very vocal. And they create fear on all sides of the spectrum. Also within us, sometimes when we travel, I risk very little doing the work that I do. Mm-hmm. Not just me, but my colleagues. And I have an amazing manager here in Israel and a team in Israel. And I don't get many people that stop me on the street and say, how dare you work for Sharaka trying to create peace? Thank God. But every one of our Muslim colleagues, they do get this on social media and they get attacked. And I think also the more people speak out within the Muslim and Arab world, and we're seeing a lot more than we ever did before, that's the more people that will join, irregardless of the extreme voices that happen.
But I do really want to amplify this point. People are putting themselves in a state of personal risk. They are maybe professionally or socially jeopardizing themselves. But I think there was even a story of an imam in Germany not so long ago. I think somebody tried to push him. There was an attempt on his life, basically, because he was expressing some moderate views about Israel or Jews or curiosity. Did you hear about this?
Yeah, I did. I say this a lot. I feel safer when I travel to the countries of the Abraham Accords. I've been to Morocco. I've been to the UAE wearing the Star of David, and I wear it every day, no matter where I am, very proudly, than I do traveling in Europe or in the United States. Because the extremist voices that exist in the United States and in Europe are very vocal, they are very radical, and they are not willing so much to change their viewpoints.
There's no engagement. It's
Exactly.
Really an echo chamber. So I'm here with my friend Shelley, and we are both just nodding emphatically as you're talking. It's true. It's really true. There's a thought leader. His name is Yossi Klein Halevi. He's at the Shalom Hartman Institute. And I heard him say that he used to think that the future of Muslim-Jewish dialogue was in the diaspora. And now he very strongly feels, as you're saying, that it's in Israel and in the home countries that we're discussing. Do you agree with that?
100%. And I think they have the ability to also educate the Muslim voices that live outside of the region, in Europe and in the United States. And we see this 100%. When we go, Sharaka, a large part of our work beyond our delegations is we do speaking tours in the United States. We go every 6 weeks to 2 months to different areas in America, really to speak about the Abraham Accords, bringing people together, whether it's to Jewish communities and we speak about combating anti-Semitism, or we speak about how to bring people together in today's society as well, because it's something that people don't think is possible anymore after October 7th, to sit a religious Jew, and I'm proudly a religious Jew, next to 3 religious Muslims in Pittsburgh, which we've done recently, and to share with an audience of Christians, Jews, and Muslims about the importance of learning about each other, of learning from each other, and also of becoming ambassadors for the region and for the Abraham Accords to combat anti-Semitism and hatred in our own societies. And I think that many people lost the faith in to be able to do this after October 7th, and we see it, thank God. every day that it's possible. And so we like to bring participants of our programs, people that essentially started as somebody that was curious, that lived in Morocco, Bahrain, the UAE, another country in the region, that understood that everything that they have been fed their life maybe isn't true, that wanted to come to Israel and be part of Shiraka and learn more about what it means to be the Abraham Accords, what it means to see something you don't know, and then came back to their country and became an ambassador for this message. And we bring these people, what we call graduates for our programs, or the colleagues of Shiraka in the Arab and Muslim world, to different communities in America to share this message. And we are able to go and talk in mosques. We're able to talk in student campuses, which maybe, I'm sad that I say this, but maybe a group of Jewish people will not be able to get into. We are able to because they are visually looking Muslims from the Middle East sharing this message and not the regular Jewish person that has something to share. And please God, in a few weeks, and we'll see if it happens, we're going to Texas, to campuses throughout Texas to share this message as well. And it's something that they asked us to come and learn because they've also understood, many campuses, that they need to do something to regain that interfaith dialogue on campus and to combat the anti-Semitism that has been living on the United States campuses and campuses throughout Europe, specifically since October 7th. And unfortunately, if you were to highlight a Jewish voice coming to campus, people may not show up or they may protest it. That doesn't mean to say we don't get protested. Sometimes we do. Often if we get protested, it's by JVP, of all people.
Jewish Voices for Peace.
Jewish Voices for Peace, exactly. But we've had plenty of Muslims that have come to our events across campuses in the United States, sat, listened, asked questions. And for me, even if they don't leave with a complete change perception, I promise you that it stays with them. And it's something that they question maybe some of their own opinions, some of their own thoughts after. And that's a large part of what we believe in as well, because our voices have the ability to spread this message to them.
So you are a young woman, you're a lovely young woman, and we are in right now your parents' apartment building because you live in Tel Aviv, is that right?
Correct.
When you go off to these countries, maybe even more the European countries in the United States, but all of these places, and you're wearing your Magen David, and you are who you are, and you look how you look, are your parents nervous for you?
No. I think that my parents knew from when I was a young age as well that this is to some form what I'd end up doing, and they cannot shut me up even if they tried to. But I think it's more than that. I think that they understand how much courage this gives me. And I think many of us after October 7th, we lost friends, we lost people in the region, we lost people that we knew. And it gives them courage as well to know that I can come back home and share stories with them over a Shabbat dinner table about the people I've worked with, about the people I've met, and the stories that I have. And I will even say the opposite. You know, I think on Yom Kippur, that was the terrorist attack in Manchester with the rabbi that I know of the community, and many people I know actually go to that synagogue. I turned my phone on after Yom Kippur. I had 55 messages from Muslims across the region saying, Alyssa, we know you're from Manchester and we want to check that your friends and family are okay. And I shared this story with my family, my extended family, and everyone that knows me in Manchester, because they all felt, as many people in Jewish diaspora felt after the Yom Kippur terror attack, they felt hopeless. And I shared it with everyone I knew because I want them to understand how many moderate Muslim voices there are that you do not hear about in your synagogues, in your communities, because unfortunately in the diaspora, you don't have enough of them. But I promise you in the Middle East that you do. And every single one that you have is a very strong ally to continue finding more. And I think that's also important. And it may be a minority of people, but it's a very strong minority. And I think that it gives them hope as well. And more than hope, please God, by continuing to do the work that Shiraka does, we can also strengthen the region. That's really our goal. And to strengthen the amount of interfaith dialogue work that exists amongst communities, both in Israel and out of Israel. And more than anything, to combat stereotypes within Holocaust denial, Holocaust distortion, and anti-Semitism that exist in the Middle East, in order to bring them a little bit closer to Israel, to working together with Jewish people, and toward a future of collaboration and connection and working with each other, and many different projects could do as well.
Does the Holocaust play a role in your family history?
No.
For some reason, I'm not surprised. Tell me what that means to you, that it's not specifically so personal for you.
Everyone asks me, it's a question I get on probably a daily basis because it's pretty much why I do what I do. I really made a promise to the Holocaust survivors that I know, and I'm very proud to know around 90 Holocaust survivors, give or take, throughout Israel and the world. And I try and stay in close connection with them as I can. And I believe that my duty to them is to make sure the world can never reach a place that it reached 82 years ago. And it doesn't matter if it has a personal connection to me and my family history. It has a personal connection to my current standing on this universe, the fact that I'm so close to them, and the fact that I see everything and I hear what they went through. And I believe that the average Jewish person, they know what happened. And so they can share these stories within their communities, synagogues, and everything like that. But who are the voices trying to emphasize this, where anti-Semitism and Holocaust distortion, unfortunately, is at its peak?
Right.
And that is the voices that we have in the Middle East that have the ability to share what happened to their communities and to their societies.
I speak with a lot of people who are about your age, who are in Israel, and they talk about the extreme strain of having to go to funerals, many, many funerals and shivas, people their own age. But what I want to ask you is, if you're working with such an older population, just there's no way around that in terms of Holocaust survivors, as they die, right? Like, how is that for you? Has that been a strain for you emotionally since you began this work?
Unfortunately, I would also just add on and say that the reality is the average Holocaust survivor that's still alive is in their very late 70s or early 80s at the youngest.
Yeah.
And these are the survivors that maybe were born much later into the war or right after the war. So it's the reality that we know about. I will say something very strong in case you haven't understood. I'm a very optimistic person. I like focusing on the optimism of everything. That's why I chose to work in the Abraham Accords, which is the optimistic approach of dialogue and peace. And I believe also it just makes me want to do my work better and faster and stronger, because in a few years they may not be here, or we may not have any survivors with us.
But I'm sure that you've lost people along the way.
Yeah. And I don't want to seem completely unemotional when I say this, but it's something I knew when I came into this. And it's hard on a personal level because I'm so close to them. But on a professional level, it makes me be like, okay, I need to get every detail of their story and every information of them as fast as possible to make sure that I can truly be a voice for Holocaust survivors when they're no longer able to be with us and share their stories. And I don't think I know a Holocaust survivor. I've been to not that many, I will share. Thank God the majority of the people I know are still with us and they're still able to share their stories. A few of the survivors I've worked with have unfortunately passed. But I do think also, without sounding again completely unemotional, it's just something I understood. They were in their late 80s, early 90s. They were already losing their functions when I first started working with them. So it doesn't surprise me. It's not the same as maybe a death after October 7th, where it's a young person that's still thriving, that has their whole life ahead of them, that unfortunately was taken away way too soon.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So again, to remind people, we are sitting here. We haven't had a siren since we started this interview, but it is a war. And I want you to share this story about you're kind of in a Zoom, maybe with some of your colleagues around the region. And this has become a regional war, right? And you're telling them you had dinner out last night and you are able to see the Iron Dome from your parents' apartment upstairs. We have incredible defenses that allow you guys to continue to have some semblance of normalcy as this is all happening. Other people in the region are not so fortunate. Can you just tell me this story about this meeting you were in and give us a little bit of a broader context about what other people in the region are going through right now?
So I think one of the things that's very unique about Chiraka is half of our team lives in the Muslim and Arab world. I have a very close colleague in Bahrain. And just yesterday I was talking to her and we were talking, it's obviously Ramadan now for Muslims around the region. And I was telling her last night I was going out with friends and we had a siren and we went to the local bomb shelter, which is in the back of the restaurant. And unfortunately for the regular Israeli, we're now in day 13, day 12 maybe.
I have no idea.
But we've been through this for the last 2 weeks and it's not the first time. And so it's part of our daily life and we are very resilient. A lot of places are closed, but when we can go out, we still try and go out a little bit. And I was telling her what we do when there is a siren. And then I asked her what she does when there's a siren. And we were having this conversation because she was shocked that everywhere, not just homes, but pretty much any public space in Israel, and she's been here several times, but it's still very different when it's a war zone. Pretty much if you're going on the streets, you will find a shelter close to you. And this is not something that they are fortunate enough to have. And I don't think they ever expected themselves to be as much in the center of the focus of a war zone as they are. They do have air defense systems to some extent, thank God, but they do not have enough shelters in their public areas as needed. And it's crazy because thank God, I'm currently in my parents' home, as you mentioned, because they have a shelter inside their house. I do not in Tel Aviv. But just thinking about the fact that my very close colleague, who's almost like a family member, she doesn't have that. And she has not as many sirens maybe as us, but plenty of sirens in Bahrain as well. And she doesn't have anywhere to go. And it is something that we're starting to think about and starting to understand more than ever now, how many of the countries in the region have really become part of this current fight against the Islamic regime as well.
And with much less to defend their populace. I want to thank you so much for taking the time. This has been really interesting. Your exuberance, your enthusiasm. I'm a little perplexed, but I'm mostly inspired. Thank you so much for sitting with me. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, and subscribe to What Came After wherever you get your podcasts. You can also find us online at whatcameafter.com.
I have faith in us, and I believe in the broken. I see greatness rising from the dust, where we'll be in the open. And I see all the stories that were told, many more were lost to the silence. I hear all the melodies of old sing